Welcome back to Twisted Fiction, where nightmares come to life. A sophomore's revenge.
Ethan Harper was a quiet, unassuming sophomore at Ridgewood High School. He was the kind of kid who went unnoticed, blending into the background with his wiry frame and thick glasses. Unfortunately, being invisible didn't protect him from the relentless torment of the school's jocks. Day after day, Ethan endured their taunts, shoves, and cruel pranks, retreating deeper into his mind where he began to plot his revenge. Ethan's tormentors were led by Brad, the captain of the football team. Brad and his cronies, Jake, Mike, and Tyler, made Ethan's life a living hell. They cornered him in the locker room, stuffed him into lockers, and made him the butt of every joke. But Ethan wasn't powerless. He had a weapon far more potent than muscle: his intellect. It started with meticulous planning. Ethan spent countless hours in the school library, researching chemistry, engineering, and psychology. He needed to understand every aspect of his revenge, ensuring it would be both brutal and untraceable. Phase 1: Jake's demise. Jake loved to swim, and Ethan knew he often used the school's pool late at night. One evening, Ethan broke into the maintenance room and tampered with the pool's filtration system, introducing a powerful and corrosive chemical compound into the water. Jake arrived at the pool, eager for a late-night swim. He dove in, expecting the cool, refreshing embrace of water, but instead, he was met with searing pain. The chemical compound began to eat away at his skin. His screams echoed through the empty building as he thrashed in the water, trying to escape. By the time he managed to drag himself to the edge, his body was a horrific sight, covered in burns and blisters. Jake died in excruciating agony, his flesh melting away. The pool water turned a sickly shade of red as his body dissolved. Phase 2: Mike's fatal joyride. Next was Mike, who loved cars and often bragged about his beloved Mustang. Ethan saw an opportunity and waited for the right moment. One afternoon, while Mike was in class, Ethan broke into the auto shop where Mike kept his car and tampered with the fuel line and brakes. Later that day, Mike sped out of the school parking lot, eager to show off his latest modifications to his friends. As he took a sharp turn on a deserted country road, he realized too late that his brakes weren't working. The car spun out of control, careening off the road and crashing into a tree. The fuel line Ethan had tampered with caused the car to erupt into flames. Mike screamed as the fire consumed him, the metal of the car melting into his skin, his body charred beyond recognition. The stench of burning flesh hung heavy in the air as his screams were drowned out by the crackling of the fire. Phase 3: Tyler's electric end. Tyler was the strongman of the group, always lifting weights and showing off his physique. Ethan decided to exploit this. One night, he broke into the gym and rigged the weightlifting equipment with a deadly trap. He connected the metal bench press to a high-voltage power source, ensuring that anyone who touched it would get a lethal shock. The next morning, Tyler arrived early to work out. He lay on the bench, ready to lift his usual weights. As soon as his hands gripped the bar, the electrical current surged through his body. His muscles seized, his body convulsing violently. The smell of burning flesh filled the air as Tyler was electrocuted, his eyes bulging, mouth frozen in a silent scream. Smoke rose from his charred body, his flesh blackened and smoldering. Phase 4: Brad's final lesson. Brad was the leader, the one who had orchestrated Ethan's torment. His end would be the most gruesome of all. Ethan knew Brad's routine and planned his final act of vengeance meticulously. He waited until Brad stayed late one night for a football practice. As Brad showered in the locker room, Ethan struck. Ethan had learned enough about anatomy and pressure points to know how to incapacitate Brad quickly. He used a chloroform-soaked rag to knock Brad out, then dragged him to the auto shop where Mike had met his end. He tied Brad to a mechanic's lift, rigging it to rise slowly. Above Brad's head, he had positioned a large, industrial drill. When Brad awoke, he found himself unable to move, the lift slowly raising him towards the whirring drill. He screamed, begged, and threatened, but Ethan remained silent, watching with cold, calculating eyes. The drill descended slowly, inching closer and closer to Brad's skull. The sound of metal grinding against bone was deafening. Brad's screams turned to gurgles as blood sprayed, and the drill finally pierced through, shredding his skull into a grotesque mess of bone, brain matter, and blood. Ethan stood over him, his face impassive as Brad's lifeless eyes stared up at him in a frozen expression of terror and agony. The aftermath. Ridgewood High was left in shock and horror. The deaths of the jocks were ruled as tragic accidents, but whispers of something more sinister spread through the halls. Ethan continued to blend into the background, his demeanor unchanged, but inside, he felt a sense of power and satisfaction. He had taken control of his destiny, exacted his revenge, and shown the world that brains could indeed triumph over brawn. As he walked through the halls of Ridgewood High, he could see the fear in the eyes of his classmates and teachers. They didn't know it was him, but they knew someone was out there, someone who was smart, ruthless, and unafraid to strike again. And that was enough for Ethan. He had become the monster they had made him, and there was no turning back.
Old Man Clemens.
The locals had always warned about Old Man Clemens. In the remote, fog-enshrouded hills of Appalachia, his decrepit farmhouse sat like a malignant growth, forgotten by time. Generations passed down tales of his grisly deeds, but those who ventured too close never returned to confirm them. It was an unusually chilly night when Sarah and her friends decided to camp near the ominous hill. They were thrill-seekers, unafraid of ghost stories and urban legends. The laughter around the campfire masked their growing unease, yet the chill in the air seemed to whisper Old Man Clemens' name. As midnight approached, a thick, unnatural fog descended, blanketing the hill. The air grew still, suffocating. The campfire sputtered and died, plunging the group into darkness. Unease turned to fear as they heard a sound, a slow, methodical scraping, like metal against stone. "Who's out there?" Jake called, his voice wavering. Silence answered him, but the scraping grew louder, closer. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as the fog parted, revealing a hunched figure at the edge of their camp. He was a nightmare made flesh, clad in tattered overalls, his eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. In his gnarled hands, he clutched a rusted pitchfork, its prongs stained dark with age and something far more sinister. "It's just an old man," Emma whispered, trying to sound brave. "We can take him." But the figure moved with a speed that belied his age, lunging forward. The pitchfork gleamed in the pale moonlight as it swung down, embedding deep into Jake's chest. He gasped, blood frothing from his lips as he collapsed, eyes wide with shock. Panic erupted. The group scattered, their screams echoing through the night. Sarah ran blindly, the fog closing in around her, muffling her cries. She stumbled over roots and rocks, her mind a whirl of terror and disbelief. Behind her, the relentless scraping continued. Old Man Clemens was toying with them, savoring their fear. One by one, their screams were cut short, leaving an eerie silence that pressed down on Sarah from all sides. Exhausted and desperate, Sarah found herself at the edge of the old farmhouse. The door hung ajar, creaking in the wind. With no other option, she slipped inside, praying for a place to hide. The interior was a museum of horrors, blood-stained walls, old newspapers with missing person headlines, and the pervasive stench of decay. She heard the scraping again, closer now. Heart pounding, she crept deeper into the house, finding a small, darkened closet. She squeezed inside, trying to quiet her ragged breaths. The door to the house creaked open, and heavy footsteps echoed through the hall. Sarah clamped a hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She could hear him moving room to room, the pitchfork scraping along the floorboards. Come out, wherever you are," he crooned, his voice a guttural rasp. The footsteps grew louder, the scraping closer. Then, silence. Sarah dared to hope he had moved on, but suddenly, the closet door was ripped open. She screamed, flailing against the inevitable, but the pitchfork plunged into her abdomen, the pain searing, white-hot. Old Man Clement's face twisted into a grotesque smile as he watched the light fade from her eyes. The next morning, the fog lifted, revealing an empty campsite. The townsfolk whispered of the latest disappearances, but no one ventured up the hill to investigate. They knew better than to disturb the silence of that cursed place. The legend of Old Man Clements grew, a grim reminder of the dangers lurking in the forgotten corners of the world. And the hill, cloaked in perpetual fog, waited patiently for its next visitors.
Thanks for tuning in. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more twisted fiction.